LEA Podcast would like to take a moment to congratulate Dale Harris on his IACA Lifetime Achievement Award. Dale was the second president and one of the founders to the association. We're going to take a moment here and have Lori Frank, one of his longtime friends and employees, talk about his accomplishments before we get to this week's episode, catching up with Dawn Reeby. Please join me in congratulating Dale Harris on receiving the IACA's Lifetime Achievement Award.
I had the incredible honor of being mentored by Dale Harris when I was a brand new crime analyst. He is not only a pioneer in our field, but also an unparalleled teacher who recognized the power of data to transform policing. Dale founded Corona Solutions with the singular vision of helping agencies optimize their patrol operations. Through his company, he has empowered over 150 agencies, allowing analysts to see the direct and fruitful impact of their work as patrol officers gain more time for proactive policing and community engagement. It is my great honor to read this statement from a true leader, my friend and former mentor, Dale Harris. I am Dale Harris, past president of IACA. I served from 1981 to 1984, when a group of us saw the need for a professional association to learn from each other and promote the concept of crime analysis. I found the IACA to be a great help in learning and sharing new concepts and practices in what was then a new concept in law enforcement. Of course, at that time, nearly everything was done with pencil and paper, and maybe an electronic calculator. Typewriters and telephones ruled since we had no computers and, of course, no software to assist us. We drew our charts and maps by hand. However, we immediately saw the need for technology in this field. While I was president, most agencies were in the early stages of computerization. One benefit of the IACA was the ability to share goals and plans for collecting and managing data. From those early conferences, we were able to visit agencies across the country, receiving and sharing tips and best practices. I am grateful to the members, past and present, who have moved the science of crime analysis forward, and I expect them to continue doing so.
If you want to find out more about Dale Harris and Lori Frank, check out the show notes for a link to their episodes on Analyst Talk with Jason Elder. Now, back to the show.
Welcome to Analyst Talk with Jason Elder. It's like coffee with an analyst, or it could be whiskey with an analyst reading a spreadsheet, linking crime events, identifying a series, and getting the latest scoop on association news and training. So please don't beat that analyst and join us as we define the law enforcement analysis profession one episode at a time.
How we doing, analysts? Jason Elder here with another LEA Podcast Deep Dive. Catching up with Dawn Reeby. How we doing?
Hey, Jason, I'm doing great. Thank you for having me here again today. I appreciate you.
I appreciate you. How was the summer that was?
A really great summer. I actually spent a couple of weeks down in Miami working with their analysts over there. I was doing pattern analysis. It's a ton of fun, and got upside down on my paddleboard. So that was a lot of fun too, and just really been enjoying the summer. The weather's been fantastic. How about yourself?
Yeah, the same. Well, after I melted in June, most of July, it's been a change in the weather here. It's starting to feel like fall, which is just not as hot, but it's more comfortable.
Yeah. I know.
So.
I was down your way in June and July rather in August, and it was toasty. It was 90 day, which is not too toasty, right?
Yeah, it's definitely toasty. So, but hey, I don't know. A couple more months, then it'll be winter, and we'll be complaining that it's too cold, right?
Exactly.
All right, very good. Well, what are we talking about today?
Yeah, so today we're talking about the concept of KPIs, or key performance indicators. How we measure success, how we, look at how analysis really influences our police agencies, and kind of put some professional framework around what that looks like and what that means.
All right. So, and that's a term that I don't know how well it's known in the law enforcement analysis realm. I don't remember actually seeing the concept of KPI until I actually left law enforcement. Let's first start with defining the KPIs a little bit, just to give our listeners an idea.
Yeah, and so you're right. So KPIs really exist in the private sector. They're key performance indicators, which basically is how you measure success. right? So it puts a professional kind of box around what does success look like. So for a business, so in my business, when I went to business school, we had to define KPIs in terms of what would make the business seem successful. Is it the amount of clients you serve? Is it the amount of income that comes in? Is it the amount of books you write? Like what are your KPIs, right? How do you measure success? And so when I started thinking about this, I realized it really wasn't in law enforcement analysis. We never talk about KPIs. We always talk about ourselves as helpers for patrol and detectives and chiefs and executives. And as you know, one of my biggest mission is to really build crime analysis legacy. Do this right. Build it in a way that can be replicated, is professional, that we are up-leveling the entire field, right? And so how do we up-level the entire field? Well, we craft out what success actually looks like so that we can then go and achieve that success. So that's kind of how I was thinking about moving it over into public sector.
Yeah, and this is one topic that's near and dear to my heart, because on the podcast, and for those that have been around a while, and one of the questions I like to ask is, what are you surprised by that law enforcement analysis hasn't figured out by now? This is a good one for that, because I would have thought 20 years ago that we would have had more KPIs, more well-defined success for not only the analyst but the analytical unit. And I think that it's not only just LEA. I think it's LE as a whole too, because it seems like we're still bean counting, the
Yes.
calls for service, response time, and the number of homicides and the number of shootings. It seems like to me that the whole kit and caboodle is behind.
Yeah, I mean, you think about it, if you become a chief, you want to reduce crime, right? Or you want to have less social harm or less crashes. And so what does it mean for us, right? So crime analysis, we really occupy a super unique position, right? So we provide that critical intel and insights, but how do we measure that, right? We support, but we don't directly control operations. Like we can say, hey, if the suspect continues this behavior, they're likely to hit in this downtown area between, let's say, 0200 and 0800 hours. But the question becomes, does anyone actually listen to that? we don't always fully control the operations. An agency can have an analyst, but the agency may not be data driven, right? So how do we account for that? Thinking about our work influences the decisions, but it doesn't actually determine the final steps or the final results. There's so many other variables. There's economics. There's how many officers you have. There's so many things that impact that final result that we really can't say crime analysis increased or decreased crime or social harm, right? And the other key thing here is that we have to maintain objectivity and in alignment with supporting the agency goals. So in business, we talk about process impact or process goals and impact goals. Like the impact goals for a police agency would be getting crime lower. But what about the process goals? Are we actually utilizing data-driven efforts? Are we, utilizing analysis the way that it should be, or do we have a bunch of analysts inputting data or producing great reports that are never utilized, or things of that nature? So this is a very important topic if we want to professionalize the field, which is, I know, a goal of yours as well.
Yeah. So do we first need to define I guess, and you did it in a way, like what success looks like for an analyst and a unit, because I think there's definitely some discussion there, and my head automatically jumps way ahead to think of like, okay, how do you document, how do you secure all this data to be able to effectively measure outcomes?
Yeah. Well, first we have to define what that would look like, right? So a couple of things I would say, like maybe some, things that we want to be aware of, we don't want to do. We don't want to have outcome fixation. We don't want to rely solely on statistics to indicate whether or not our work as analysts is quality analytical work, right? So that's the first thing. We want to hold analysts responsible for the decisions that they make, like, how they're producing a quality analysis, but not necessarily hold them accountable for the decisions that the agency makes around analysis. What I've seen some agencies do, again, talking about some pitfalls in measuring, KPIs or successes is they talk about reports. They say we're going to measure our quality, or we're going to measure our key performance indicator would be producing 1 bulletin a week, or 1 ComStat report a month, or 10 requests. That is not KPI. That is bean counting. We're just bean counting crime analysis activities, right?
Yeah.
And so we need to move away from the quantity and really dive into the quality. We don't want to incentivize that junk analysis, which just helps analysts, create these narratives rather than the objective truth. So we don't want to talk about, we want to reduce crime, right? Like, of course, an agency wants to do that. But instead, we want to talk about, as an analytical function, what the role is in that process. And then that is going to help us indicate success.
All right. What's a good example of that, just to drive this point home?
So I would say there's a couple of great examples, right? So if I'm an analyst, I'd want to look at maybe some of the products that I produce, how many of them result in something positive when it is used, right? So you kind of see like the difference there. You can't just say result in something positive. You have to really say like when it's actually used, right? And so so you can talk about the quality of products. You might have some kind of survey that goes out to the agency that says, is the analytical unit responding, within 24 hours to reports or requests that could be responded to in 24 hours, right? And so we can document those and write those down. For instance, like a CLEAR report, looking at the crime at a school, that should be a 10-second turnaround, right? You should have a query set up where that is an easy turnaround. And so it should not take 4 days for that to get kicked out, right? And so we can use some time parameters around KPIs like that to really say, okay, well, easy requests should, and we can quantify easy, should take less than 24 hours. And what does that actually look like? So what about you? Do you have any KPIs at your agency right now where you're just like, yeah, this is how we measure success?
So I think about that in terms of that, and of course I'm not in law enforcement anymore, so I think about all the different KPIs we have at work. It's interesting because you hit the nail on the head in terms of the time component. It's like there's a lot of different times that are captured because time is money. So that's another one. And and then some of them, I one of the things at work is just getting more like, some of them are just abstract, right? And I don't like those as much, because it's like, did you help Vanderbilt be a great workplace? I was like, yes, I was not a jerk to my coworkers. Thank you.
Right.
So some of them get kind of abstract, but some of them, like these long-term projects, and you're right, I assisted here, I helped there, and then if I'm trying to write down how did I make a difference on this project, it is tough. It's tough to sit there and quantify how I impacted it. I've always had that struggle with creating resumes too. How do I put on a resume what I do, and how do I make it more actionable terms as opposed to assisted and helped and those less punchy words, right?
Exactly. And I think you can say things like, we built out the policies and procedures for a key KPI for a crime analysis unit could certainly be that you develop the infrastructure, right? So what does that infrastructure look like? Well, we have a well-positioned vision of what the analytical unit is going to be. We have a policy on how the agency properly utilizes an analytical function. We have, our procedures all documented so that when we onboard somebody, they have a spot to go to where they click on a button and they see how to generate every single report, every single analysis, what data source it comes from, what maybe any templates that you use, right? So you could say one of the KPIs could certainly be that infrastructure. That's something that's well defined, right? And so I teach a class through the IACA right now for supervisors on this very thing. Like, what is the proper infrastructure? So we talk about the proper vision, not the vision for the agency, but the vision for the analytical unit, and how developing that is a key performance indicator. If you develop it, fantastic, checkbox, right? And if it's implemented and accepted by the agency, a double check mark, right? So there's two kind of indicators there. We talk about developing roadmaps for all of our analysts so that, we know exactly what skills you want that analyst to develop. Do you want them to be excellent at Excel? Well, who cares? Why? What do you want them to do with Excel? What's the purpose of it, right? Do you want them to create platforms that are usable for your officers, right? Maybe some slicers or switchboards or things of that nature. Why? To ease data access from the field. So a key performance indicator wouldn't be my analyst knows how to use Excel. A key performance indicator could be that they've created some kind of tool that makes it easier for officers to access or for supervisors to access data from the field. Right? And so so when we develop that infrastructure and when we develop those roadmaps of what skills do we want our analysts to have and why, it's the and why that becomes our key performance indicator, right? So other key performance indicators I could think about relative to legacy would be evaluation forms. If you currently don't have evaluation forms that mirror your roadmaps for your analysts, which are kind of the skills you want them to develop and why, then they'll never know what success looks like. Probably 80% of the agencies that I work with, whether through the IACA or private consulting, don't have roadmaps for their analysts. None of them know what it looks like to be successful. And so we, immediately develop those roadmaps and say, if you're an entry-level analyst, these are the skills you need to have, and here's why. If you're an intermediate, here are the skills and why. And so forth, right? And these are the actions that we want you to do. So the process of that in the beginning could actually be those key performance indicators for an analytical unit. Portfolios. The fact of all analysts having a portfolio that showcases their analytical products, the successes, the challenges, how they overcame it, how they assisted, the development of those portfolios could be a key performance indicator, that you fill your portfolio with at least 10 successes a year, right? So you can have unique key performance indicators that really highlight the impact of what an analytical function does at an agency.
Yeah, and I think I'm required now when anybody uses portfolio on the show to mention Sean Baer, because he's a big proponent of portfolios in the interview process.
Absolutely. I mean, of course, so we have a template with our folks on our site to use, which is pretty generic. It's pretty basic, but you don't just please, if you're listening to this, don't just grab reports and stick them in your portfolio. You want to go through an approval process, right? To remove, you remove your products or redact them or whatever it might be. But Sean's right. We really need to show people what we've done and what impact we've created. And that really is the key word, impact, not things that we do. No one cares that you developed CompStat. No one cares that you developed a bulletin. What we care about was, what's the impact of CompStat? What's the impact of those bulletins, right? So another key performance indicator for an analyst might be, the percentage of analytical products that directly contributed to cases cleared, right? So if you produce a bulletin that no one reads, then who cares? Yeah. But if you're producing a bulletin that you discover that it was utilized in case clearance, that creates that concept of impact.
Yeah, and that, I think you might have mentioned it, but that's where surveys could come in handy, right? Because how you would document that is, you could have the analyst go out and ask personally, but at the end of an investigation or a project, if there is an after action survey, that would be something that could be for the whole team of, okay, the analyst produced X, Y, and Z. What was your opinion, or how do you feel that it impacted the project?
Absolutely. So there's lots of different ways to measure key performance indicators, and certainly a survey maybe once a year would be helpful to really gain some of that feedback. And maybe it's a matter of, it's anecdotal, maybe it's sitting in a roll call and saying, hey, was this helpful? Or talking with a detective and saying, hey, was this helpful? Getting some feedback. I see a lot of analysts really sitting in their office not knowing if anything has been read or anything has impact. And so we really want to be sure that we're clear about what does success look like. if you're an agency right now that says success looks like the analyst produces CompStat, well, heck, I have seen CompStats. I've recently worked with an analyst. His CompStat was 46 pages long. To me, that's not success.
And to me, that's still small. That's still
To you, it's small.
I've seen hundreds of pages on a weekly basis.
Right? But to me, is it successful if people peruse it and it's not actionable? What would be successful to me is it was actionable, that there was information in there that was utilized to drive strategies, right? And so as we're kind of talking about these, I know it feels like it might feel a little abstract, but if you dig deep in, kind of take this step by step, you can see that you can create 4, 5, 6 key performance indicators for a brand new unit, right? Like that would be all the operational stuff, getting them on their off their feet, developing those legacy documents and so forth. And then you could also move into, with a more developed team, the utilization and that feedback piece and the conversations that you have with others. Because Jason, here's what I find is that a lot of analysts just don't relate to what they actually do. One of the things I talk to a lot of analysts about is what they actually do for their agency. And they say things like, I help detectives. These phrases fall short of our true value. And so when we develop these key performance indicators, we're developing our true value, we're articulating it, we're documenting it, and it's purposeful, right? I transform raw data into actionable intelligence that helps protect our communities. Well, let's figure out how to measure that. That's a great purpose statement, right? I ensure that our agency's limited resources are deployed where they'll have maximum impact. Okay, fantastic. So how do we measure that? What things did we do that helped us save money and deploy with maximum impact, right? And then, another purpose-driven statement would be, I connect patterns and trends that might otherwise remain hidden. Fantastic. So how do we measure that, right? We measure that by saying how many patterns do you detect? Now, if you're an agency of like 13 cops, you probably aren't going to detect a heck of a lot of patterns, right? You might have a different key performance measurement indicator, right? But, for agencies that are larger, or maybe, 50 or more officers, there are likely patterns and trends. And so maybe it is a matter of seeing kind of, how many can I detect in the beginning? And then how many can I properly relay or provide predictions to the folks who are going to create impact? And then after that, how many resulted in something positive.
All right. As you mentioned, you're going through teaching some of this stuff to managers. I'm curious, what feedback are you getting? Where's the biggest pushback that you're getting?
I feel like the biggest pushback is the analysts don't articulate well what they do. And therefore, the managers don't know what to ask of them. And so, so things that the managers are asking me is like, yeah, we have a great crime analysis unit. They send me stuff all the time. And then I ask them the question, what do you use? What's your favorite product? And they're like, oh, we really don't use anything, but they give us a lot of really cool stuff. Or I don't know. I don't know what to actually use. I don't know how to use what they tell me to use. And if a manager is saying I don't know how to use it, it's a pretty product, that tells me that product's not actionable. So a KPI at that agency needs to really focus on how actionable the reporting is. So from the analyst side, I think the biggest downfall is they don't know how to articulate what they do. I was called an elevator speech, right? Like, how do you tell someone what you do in a couple of minutes who doesn't know anything about your role? And the majority of analysts ask yourself this question right now. If you're an analyst listening to this, what do you do? Are you automatically saying things like, I do CompStat, or I do write-ups for detectives, or I do data requests? Well, those are the things. Those aren't the purpose. So no one cares. No one cares how you do your stuff. We care about the purpose. And so instead, we want our analysts to say things like, I transform complex data sets into clear, actionable intel products. Or I guide operation decision-making and strategic planning. Or I identify emerging crime patterns and trends that might otherwise be hidden. Or I provide the analytical foundation for evidence-based resource allocation. So once we actually define our elevator speech, it becomes much easier to create these KPIs around our purpose. And that the biggest part of all of this, Jason, is to find purpose and not think. And that's why the elevator speech and the KPI goes hand in hand. Yeah. I've seen a lot of analysts say, well, how do I create an elevator speech? Because they feel like they do everything. I mean, I
Mhm.
sometimes feel like I do everything, right? Like someone says, what do? You don't want to skip anything. So your elevator speech is like 12 pages long, right? And you can't do that, right? You can't do that. It has to be delivered with confidence. I hear a lot of analysts saying, I feel like I'm lying. I feel like I'm lying when I say I identify patterns because really all I do is data entry right now because we don't have systems. So for them, I say, well, a key performance indicator is to develop systems that streamline your workflow, right? And so what does that KPI look like? Well, it
Yeah.
looks like a system. It looks like templates. It looks like workflow management tools, right? So, so if you're feeling as an analyst like you really don't have systems in place, then that is your KPI. Put systems in place that make it easier, faster, so that you form the analytics that you.
Yeah. And you can stay in there for a long while. Like that is an area where if you're cleaning data or doing data management, that's a KPI in itself, and that you solved an issue with the data, right?
Exactly. What problems do I want to solve? And that could be the KPI. If you're a homicide analyst, you might have a problem that maybe some of your cold cases get forgotten about, and you want to create a system that allows you to easily access the cold cases, where we are in those cases, to have some kind of relief for the families, some type of annual contact, whatever it might be. So the KPI would be to develop a system so it allows for annual contact, right? And so what does that look like? Well, it might be an access database. I don't really care. No one cares about the how. We care about the impact. And so we as analysts and supervisors need to be thinking less about the things that we do, the reports, the Excel sheets, the access databases. Yeah, those are ways that we do them, but we need to really be thinking about the impact that we have. I synthesize complex information, right?
Hmm.
I provide commanders with a holistic view of potential threats. Great. That's something we can measure. We can measure the potential threats that you've discovered, right? If you work for a DA's office, right, you might say, I support prosecutors by analyzing evidence and crime trends. I build stronger cases. I understand patterns of reoffending, and I ultimately contribute to more just and effective judicial outcomes. Well, that's measurable, right? That's measurable to say, like a lot of district attorney office analysts are just throwing stuff together. Well, instead of that, I want to create a system that analyzes evidence more succinctly. So that could be your KPI. So KPIs can change. It's okay too, right? I think in business we change every month, right? We have our overarching KPI, but then we have what's our key performance indicator of success for this month. And it might be the relationships that you start. It might be the kind of relationships that maybe have gone away that you tap into. So it can change as we move throughout our month, our year. Okay.
Yeah. I guess what would your advice be to somebody that's really on the ground floor? And because what I'm worried about with some is this is a lot of extra. And probably when you ask most analysts, do they have extra time? They're going to tell you no. So I'm concerned with this is just going to be brought off as like, oh, it's too complex. I can't do this. We don't have the infrastructure. We don't have the project management. We don't have the portfolio. We don't have the documentation. I'm holding on by a string here, just trying to manage my day-to-day operations. I don't see how I'm going to be able to develop a KPI.
Yeah, and in that case, I would say it's almost necessary that they do, or
Mhm.
they're going to hate their lives. Because the reality is, if you are hanging on like that, if you are back to back to back to back, not taking lunches, and you have so much to do, then chances are your systems are not set up properly. Chances are you might not have access to data. Chances are you might not have a workflow that is effective, right? And so the way to start always is to define the vision, which is essentially later on measured through those key performance indicators. So you could have one indicator that says, I am going to streamline my workflow over the next 3 months, right? I've worked with analysts who, I'm thinking of this New Hampshire analyst that is such a great success. She did everything manually forever and ever and ever. And then she came into our crime analysis program and she says, I know I need to make things easier. I know I need to streamline processes because I never actually analyze. I'm just maintaining the data, right, in an Excel sheet. And so it took a little work, but she had, she took some Access courses and she learned, and we helped her connect her database. And all of a sudden, all the inputting that she did went away because now the database was connected. And so now she just read the reports like what an analyst is supposed to do and plugged in her information. And she has so much more free time now to actually analyze data. So her KPIs in the beginning were simply to stop drowning and create a couple of systems. And then she rejoined the program actually twice. This is her third time. It might even be her fourth time because there's different levels, right? Mm-hmm. And now she says, Dawn, I've learned all the tools that the people before me used to say, do it, get the systems in place. She's like, I've learned all those, and now I need new goals. I need new ways of actually utilizing the system. And so she's learning about how to up the level of that, right? But in the beginning, it started with an elevator speech. It started with crafting that language of what we actually do. It started with one goal, and chances are it is system-based for most analysts. It is, how can I streamline my systems so that I can actually do analysis?
All right. Someone listening to this, how can they get more information, Dawn?
Yeah, sure. So we have a bunch of these kind of micro-learning programs over at Dawn Reeby. So DAWNREE, B as in boy, Y, at podia.com. We have a bunch of micro-learning programs over there, like key performance indicators and elevator speeches with much more detail in there, as well as productivity and all kinds of fun stuff going on right now. We have a couple of analyst bundles where you can just start learning, micro-learning. It doesn't have to be 7 hours a day. It could be like 20 minutes. I know that I want to improve my systems. How do I start to do that? Or I know that I want to indicate something about myself. How do I do that? How do I say my elevator speech better? How do I get the job I want? How do I do my portfolio? So we have a ton of opportunity over there, and certainly through the IACA and through our Excellence in Analytics, we have our crime analysis program. If you're looking to go hardcore for 6 months, we have a bunch of those things. But if you're looking to just get started, you can go over there, read some blogs. A lot of these things are free. Some of them are like $20, and they're really intended to help people just start and move and then get excited and do a little bit more and a little bit more.
Excellent. And we'll put in the show notes links for the information that Dawn just described. All right, Dawn, I guess what's next?
Well, I'm so excited. I'm working on a 12-week project with the IACA. It's called Crime Analysis Automation and Productivity, Transforming Workflows for Maximum Impact. It is one of the 12-week online programs. And I'm actually really excited about this one because I'm throwing in some great AI tools as well as workflow automation techniques. I see way too many analysts doing things the hard way. I just want to package it all up on a bunch of tips on how to do it much more easily, right? So that should be coming out pretty soon. Be on the lookout for that. It certainly has helped me in so many ways. People ask me all the time, Jason, how do you get so much done? I mean, you work full-time at an agency, you run a business full-time, you're a yoga teacher, instructor, training instructor, a mom. This is how I do things. This is how I get it done. I cut
you sleep 3 hours, right?
Right? I cut the fat, I automate what needs to be automated, and I put my time, my love, my energy into the things that matter. And so, so I think we can do that together as an analytical community. There's so many people that I learn things from in my journeys that I build into these courses. So I'm thankful for all of them as well. But that 12-week Transforming Workflows for Maximum Impact I'm really excited about that coming out over the next month or two.
Nice. And if people want to get a hold of you, what's the best way to get a hold of you?
Email dawn@excellenceinaanalytics.com. I generally respond to my emails within 24 hours.
Yeah, and you got a KPI for that, right?
I sure do.
All right, Dawn, it was great catching up with you. Until next time, be safe.
All right. Thank you, Jason.
Thank you for making it to the end of another episode of Analyst Talk with Jason Elder. You can show your support by sharing this and other episodes found on our website at www.leapodcasts.com. If you have a topic you would like us to cover or have a suggestion for our next guest, please send us an email at leapodcasts@gmail.com. Till next time, analysts, keep talking.